Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Plectroverse. I'm John Tron Davidson from Heavy Repping, and I'm here with Jack from Jaketto Picks. Welcome to the show.
G'day.
G'day. G'day indeed. It is early in the morning on the other side of the world, I believe.
Yeah, it's quite a rainy day, so I'm basically just going to do this, and then, as always, I'm jumping into guitar picks.
Excellent. And it is actually a little bit odd for me, in a way, to be talking to you as we normally communicate through voicemail.
Yeah, well, usually it's me sending you stuff at opposite time ends and in the middle of the night your time, or you send it middle of the night my time. There's been countless times where I've woken up 4 o'clock and go to start making picks, and I've got 10 messages from you about just community or picks or another random kind of out there subject that we both kind of divulge into.
Yeah. No, it's been it's nice to we've shared quite a lot of stuff about aliens and ancient technology and all that sort of thing, and it has been nice to have somebody to talk about that with. So
yeah. Unfortunately, with the weird subjects, there's not many people in there.
No, I think there's a lot more in the there's a lot more snaking about in the community than you might think.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I don't openly talk to people about it.
Maybe we've just never crossed that ground. I don't know.
Yeah, possibly.
Now, I am going to ask you, my friend, for the people who do not know, what was it that got you into making picks? What was it that got Jaketto started?
Okay, so Jaketto is this weird cocktail, and that's probably the best way to put it, is this weird blend of me not being happy with any guitar pick I've tried in the end of it. There's been ones where I've been like, that hits so close to what I want and so much to what I require, and then I got to this point where I'm like, I know what I want. I knew from experience with other pick makers and everything like that I wanted to use epoxy or resin, potato in that situation. And what happened was I was like, I know I want that. I know I want to do something a little bit different. I don't want to do this, do that. But then it all kind of started, the actual pick making side of things. I was already into, I guess, quote unquote, I was into boutique picks or higher end picks. And I kind of had this idea of what I wanted to do. So I started making picks, and I didn't have a job at the time because of health reasons. And my wife said, well, you're kind of getting better now. Why don't you sell these guitar picks you're making? And I went, yeah, okay. And because of my background in building websites and high-end music sales and building music websites and being a sales rep and everything, it was kind of this perfect blend where Jaketto just kind of sprung to life, and here we are, basically. So it came through, to answer the question directly, it came through a desperation of wanting a pick I liked wholeheartedly.
Yeah. It's quite often the case where a lot of people are saying, the majority of pick makers that I speak to say that it's because what they wanted to achieve with the pick just wasn't out there, whether it's a grip thing or it's the material or the sound or all that sort of stuff. Now I know that you have come from doing we talked a lot in the past about your background in music sales and all the rest of it. Did you have any fabrication background before getting into doing Jaketto, especially because you're working with resin?
No, this is a really weird thing. So I'll probably answer this one on behalf of Smitty, our other pick maker as well. Smitty has more of a background working with things than me. The reason being is that he used to, not professionally, but he used to do it a lot, was detail cars. So he worked with sandpaper. I had never touched basically a tool in my life. I had no idea. So it was just like me jumping into this water being like, oh no. And then, it gets to this point where you're like, what have I got myself into? And obviously I didn't sell picks till I got to a point where I was pretty competent at it. But yeah, there was no background. It was literally me being like, okay, I didn't even know how to use epoxy at the start. There were lots and lots of errors, which I'm pretty sure I've told you a few times. But it was just this really, really deep dive into the deep end of creation and everything. So the first one I ever made is actually right in front of me. But and I'm pretty sure I've sent it to you before. And oh well, sorry, the first one I've actually made successfully. There's a massive distinction there that people don't kind of see, where they might go, "What's the first pick you ever made?" And I show them this one, and I look at it and go, "Oh, that's a piece of garbage." But the reality is, I had hundreds before that were completely non-successful, that didn't have anywhere near an ounce of quality to it.
Yeah, it must be quite difficult, because a lot of the guys I've spoken to have come from a background. They've come from carpentry, or they've come from orthopedics, or they've come from steel metal fabrication or something like that. But to go in, especially with resin, because it's not an easy material to work with. But did you specifically, and I have to ask because this is a defining characteristic of Jaketto, that, and we're not going to go, because I never really ask about the specifics, because everyone has their trade secrets, as it were.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that's improper to do that. But is it a particular tonality that you wanted to go for? Was it epoxy because I'm not going to beat around the bush here, it looks cool?
Yeah.
Or was it the fact that it grips, or it just let you express what you wanted to do with the pick? Or
yeah.
What's the principal reason for going down that road?
I guess it's a multitude of things, where I wanted something really, really smooth, because I'm primarily a lead player. It's very rare I kind of play rhythm or anything like that. I do enjoy it, but it doesn't happen that often. So I'm primarily a lead player, so I just wanted something that just glided across the strings, which a bunch of materials could do, but I knew what the tone of epoxy was going to be. So to counter that off, I'm also a very, how could you say it? I'm very experimental when it comes to colours, as everyone can see. And Smitty gets involved, and so does Mandy, who does our shipping and customer care. But I often bring her in, because even though I'm very experimental with the colours, and people that know or associate with Jaketto know kind of we do a lot of outrageous stuff, I get them in, so I'm not kind of on this feedback loop of, oh, that looks cool. So I've got other people in the mix there deciding colours, or sometimes I'll put it out to the public where we kind of ask what do they want to see, because epoxy is this weird thing where you have so much expression with it, but if you get it wrong, man, you get it wrong. You absolutely get it wrong, which we've had so much experience with, unfortunately. But that's the thing that comes back with epoxy, is it's this duality of, if you get it right, it's going to be really good. If you get it wrong, man, you're going to get it wrong, especially because you're dealing with chemicals.
Now, for the listeners who are not aware of this, when it comes to working with resin, it's a very different process from wood, or from acrylic, or keraynite, or casein even. You don't just have a big sheet and cut a thing. You got to pour it and make it happen. And we're not going to get into like I said, we're not going to get into the machinations of it. But did you have any? And I know you talked about mistakes making picks, but did you have any horror stories when you were trying to learn how to use epoxy as a material?
Yeah, I firstly, I would say to anyone that goes into jumping into the massive Plectroverse and making picks and everything like that, don't start like I did. That was, as I've said to Mr. Jontron Davidson here a million times, we're a fruit case scenario of this, whether for good or for bad, where everything's kind of worked out for us as pick makers. So what actually has happened, a bad scenario, just to kind of involve, is we have had... okay, first story off the top of my head, and I'll leave it at this, but I'll give you a good idea, is that we had a bad batch of resin, and it was awful and terrifying, to put it bluntly. So what would happen when we mix this? As soon as we would mix it, probably about 2 minutes in, because you're dealing with chemicals, sometimes if it's a bad batch, you don't know how this is going to react. So I've mixed these together. Mandy was doing work as usual. Smitty wasn't there this day, and smoke just started bucketing out of the like where we're pouring. So in kind of the canister, I guess is the best word, canister.
Nice.
I'm stirring it. Sorry, and steam is just bucketing out. And I went, oh no, here we go. Here's these horror stories you hear about 1 in a million, when it's probably 1 in 50 if you're unlucky. So what happened was this started coming up and it just solidified, and it's starting to solidify. And I've kind of jumped back trying to distance myself from the resin that's solidifying. And what's happened is I've got some on my leg at the same time, like just a little bit. And for those that don't know, if you've got mixed epoxy or resin, what will happen is if it gets on your body, it will start to itch and burn. And basically, if it's bad enough, you're going to hospital. There's no way around it. So I've luckily had Mandy there. Otherwise, I would have been gone. I said to her, just grab detergent and like a washing up sponge kind of thing. I think I just said sponge at the time. I said, get me that and get me a razor as well. so yeah,
Sponge.
yeah. And she
not to make light of your circumstances.
Oh no, it's pretty hilarious looking back, really. So she ran outside, had this. She knew what was going on, but she didn't know the severity, as it's something that we had, we'd dealt with before in terms of, maybe a little bit on your finger, but not to this state where it's just steaming up. So I've got this on my leg. There's steam coming off my leg, and I can feel a little bit of an itch. This is in the space of 30 seconds. I think it's probably important that we tell listeners that. So I've ran out of the workshop. I've started cleaning my leg, and Mandy's been like, what? You've had this before. It comes off. I'm like, no, this is different. So I'm outside, and I've got this off my leg, and then I shave my leg and then clean for about 30 minutes. And luckily, that is a good scenario. It's just been this scenario where that had never happened before to that extent. We have had scenarios where stuff has gone wrong, or we've had another bad batch, and it's, that's thousands of dollars down the drain, and there's nothing you can do about it apart from talking to the distributor, and they go, oh, well, you know what you're buying, or something to that, and then it's just like, oh, well, there's money down the drain. But the funny thing was, I was like, maybe I made a mistake with this. Maybe I'm the culprit here, and I completely stuffed up the measuring ratio. So I did another one, and I had Mandy with me, and I said, oh, you can do the colors this time. She said, cool. So we started doing it, and I thought, this is going well. So it was me. So I started pouring it, and as I'm pouring it, this stuff started steaming again, and as it's coming out of the canister or mug, whatever you want to call it, the place where we're mixing, as it's coming out, it started solidifying in midair as it's going down. And Mandy goes, that's not right. And I said, yeah, I was scared last time, don't you? So she didn't question me again on that, which was quite lucky because she got to see it firsthand. So fortunately, since then, I think we've had one incident, and that was only a few months ago. And the thing is, when we have incidents like this, we don't tend to make it public, but all the artists hear about it, because obviously we have an artist chat.
Of course.
But they hear about all the failures, all the everything, and the good thing about Jaketto in terms of that is, whilst there are a lot of successes with what we do, people don't see the failures that we have behind the scenes, except the artists who get to laugh at me about all this. So, it is what it is.
Well, a cautionary tale there, ladies and gentlemen. If it seems like it's going wrong, it definitely is.
Yes, and the big thing is,
don't let it get in your legs.
Yeah. Well, it was one of these times where I probably the first time I didn't wear jeans when I was doing it, and it could have been pretty bad. But the other thing too is a lot of people do ask in this kind of nature while I'm on this subject, and I've talked to you about this probably 3 or 4 times. A lot of people ask how we do it, and I'm a bit reluctant to tell people in case we give information that ends up with them being in a situation like that, because the best thing to do if you're looking into resin or epoxy is be 100% safe. You don't want to take any precautions, because what can go wrong, like any chemical, what can go wrong can be an absolute travesty for you or anyone else, basically.
Yeah. Well, sage advice there. So let us keep that.
yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a good thing to stick with, I think. Now, on the subject of picks in general, because I'm always interested in this, especially given that everybody has a different journey. Obviously, we've talked about what got you into making picks. But I'm
Mm.
interested to know, do you remember? Do you, and it's an odd thing because a lot of the time when we're coming up as players, it's just something we never think about. In terms of, you don't maybe think about it at the time, whatever. But do you remember what your first pick was, and leading up to, and everybody gives me the same story. So it's like, oh, it's just this thing, but I'm always interested, and I'm interested to know what you were using, um, you know, prior to making your own stuff.
Okay, so do you want the short version or the long version, John?
It's your call, man.
Okay, so I'll
You
kind
can
of get it.
give us the long one. I don't mind.
Okay, cool. So to start with, I used really, really, really thin picks. Like if I saw it in the shop and it was basically paper thin, I'm like, that's the one for me, man. That's got to be it. And at the same time I was doing this, I was always like, man, these picks, they're not that good. But at the same time, I'm always thinking, yeah, I'm a thin guitar pick player. That's me. And for some reason, obviously myself included, I find that people tend to start identifying themselves with the picks they use and never branch out from that, which is okay if you're happy with what you got. But a lot of people still want to be in that headspace of, oh, I don't like this pick, but then they keep buying those picks. So I was in that situation for a long time with thin picks, and then I went up a little bit, then I went down a little bit in thickness. I just kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then I got to this point where, when I was playing 4 hours a day, just like metronome work, just continuous, I'm like, there's got to be a pick that doesn't degrade like as fast as this does, because I'm going through like packs a day. So I went onto the old internet and I just typed in long lasting guitar pick. I think that was the exact words I typed in, and I came across this really, really, really weird guitar pick that I'm holding in my hand right now. And I think it was Dragon's Heart or Dragon Heart. I always forget which one it actually is. You can probably correct me. And I saw it, and I'm like,
it's Dragon's Heart, but he'll be cool with it.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I saw that, and I'm like, going back to pretty much what happened with Jaketto, where I'm just like, really with colors and that and design, I'm always just like, hey, throw this at the wall and see what sticks, basically, which is a great way of doing stuff. So as soon as I saw these picks in a weird shape, I'm thinking, even if I don't like it, the worst case scenario is I know what I don't like. So I got one, and I used one or two of them for about 2 or 3 years. And it got to this point where I was like, hey, you know what? If this is out there, maybe there's more. So I bounced from that. Then I went to Iron Age, and then I went to Stone Age, and then I went back to Iron Age. And then I was using Iron Age for about a year, possibly. And then I had a few conversations with Alex from Velocity Picks, and I got one of his picks. I'm not sure if he's still around, but he's a lovely Australian bloke. I think he's from Queensland from memory. And he was using epoxy. And basically, long story short, he sent me down one, and I fell in love with epoxy. And what happened there was, though, in terms of what we do different to that one, was that this is coming back to, the actual question here, is that I found that I'm never going to be happy with guitar picks. That I'm just going to make one and keep going until I find one I'm absolutely in love with. And I knew it was epoxy because of my experience with Velocity Picks. And I knew how they could glide, the tone, everything. I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. I just need to make one that's perfect for me. And I think it would have been quite unfair to Alex from Velocity if I spent, every day saying, hey, can you try this? Can you try this? Can you try this? Can you try this? A million times over and over. It just wouldn't have worked. And I think it's one reason why I think if I was a famous musician or anything like that, if I had an endorsement, that I would be the biggest pain, because I'd always be, especially for picks, guitars I can kind of settle with, sounds like amps and pedals I can settle with, but guitar picks is just something I couldn't walk past. So it would have been unfair for me to send Alex, who was working with epoxy, I couldn't go to him every day, hey, I want to try this, I want to try this, I want to try this. It's just unfair. So I thought, oh, I'll make my own, and I didn't really have any intention of selling them or anything to start with. It didn't even cross my mind. It was just like, I need something to play with here that's my own. And what actually ended up happening was, after that, after I got into this, and then, we started selling picks because, I'm still on the hunt for the perfect pick, but it did happen. The perfect pick absolutely did happen to me. And now it's up over your way. It's living in, where is it? It's in the UK. It's with a guy we endorsed called Wesley Webb. It was called the Dragon Vein pick. It was my perfect pick. The best thing I've ever made. The best thing I've ever played. I will wholeheartedly stand by that the rest of my life unless something else happens. And yeah, I miss that pick. I don't regret sending it to him because Wesley and I are good friends, but it's just one of those scenarios where I looked at it and thought, is this going to be mine or is it going to a home? Because in a way you get this this feeling of it needs to be shared, I guess is the best way to put it. That even though it's the best thing for me as a pick maker or a business owner or anything, the best part of what I do is sharing what I do. So it gets to this point where I look at the scenario and go, okay, I've played with hundreds of picks a day basically now, or 50 picks or 20 picks a day, whatever happens. And it's at this point where I'm comfortable with nearly any pick that's 2 mils or above, but anything below that I'm a bit odd with, particularly Jazz 3s. Even though I love Jazz 3s, I just kind of got to this point where I've worked too much outside that realm where it's uncomfortable. So where I'm at now in terms of a player and using picks, it's probably in the 6mm range. But in saying that, something we do, I made myself a pick, which was about 2mm, and it slopes up to a 6mm. So it's actually got a gradient in the thickness, which is something cool. I don't think any other pick makers are doing. If they do, I'm sorry, I haven't seen it, but I'm not going to say, oh, it's Jaketto only, because other people are probably doing it. So that is something cool because it goes along like kind of the ridge of your thumb. And yeah, that's basically where I'm at. It's either like a massive thick 6mm or 7mm, or it's this sloped gradient one I actually made myself. So yeah, it's one of the two there, from these really, really thin picks to going in, finding Dragon's Heart, blah, 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 and then clicking onto epoxy with Alex from Velocity Picks, and then, having a desire to make one myself because I was just never going to be happy.
Well, it's a very common thing that I hear when I'm speaking to particular luthier mates of mine. I've got a mate over here called Seth Backus who's makes a lot of high-end electrics, and he said he's found himself in a number of situations where you spend so much time crafting a thing, especially because this is a very physical, sort of tangible area of working. So it's not a case of it's not like writing software code where there's no physical product. Like you're actually holding on to this item, and letting it go can be very, very hard. But like you said, that pick is out in the world now, blowing somebody else's mind, and that's kind of the whole point of the exercise, really.
Yeah, and I think
So
to add,
that's a plus.
Absolutely. I think to add to that is that anyone that follows us, or you'd be aware, but for the people that aren't aware, is that everything we do is one of a kind. Apart from, the Z series, which is currently under rework, which is cool. But basically, because it's one of a kind, there's sometimes people go, oh, I looked at your picks and this one's a little bit misshapen. It's like, yeah, we do that on purpose. Either me or Smitty will be making a pick and we're like, hey, how about we make it a bit higher in this corner or whatever, because it just seems funny to me that when I was a guitar tech for a very brief period in my life, I worked on 10 Les Paul stands in a row, and I found that every single one had its own kind of magic going on, or these little nuances that would happen. And I kind of look at guitar picks in the same way, where Oh, a fabulous story I've got for people that are new to guitar pick heaven here with heavy repping. Basically, I had a guy here named Zach who is a local bloke who plays in a solo project called Appellative. Go check that out; it's really good. But he came over. I said, "Oh, he sent me a message. Can I buy some picks?" I said, "Yeah, man, come over. You can play whatever you want. If you like one, you can get some." So we sat down, and he's going between like 2 mils, 6 mils, 5 mils, 4 mils, everything under the sun, different shapes, different bevels, different points, everything. And he got to this point where he's sitting there, and I remember just staring at him. He's got his Music Man there, and he looks up at me and goes, "They all sound different." And I said, "Yeah, they do." And it's been this weird scenario of because everything's made slightly different and everything has different densities because of the way we treat it, or we might do a certain technique or whatever it may be. They all kind of have, and we're not talking about like you're going to pick one up and it's going to have a phaser going on it. Like, that's just ridiculous. But that's an example. You're not going to pick it up and have this massive tone distinction. As you'd know, John, it's not like a black and white, but it might be, if you've got different epoxy, you might have a black and grey scenario as opposed to black and white scenario, if that makes sense in terms of contrast.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where people think it's a bit like I always liken it to the pedal scenario where overdrive is, as a principal thing, overdrive is a very subjective thing, and somebody might get it and go, you got a bunch of Proco rats, and they're all from different time periods. They're all rats, and some of them might even share the same chips, but they don't all behave exactly the same. And somebody somewhere will be going, oh, "This is amazing." And with picks, it is a much more subtle aspect. Sometimes the contrast is quite extreme in terms of top end or force or bass response or how muted it is, or how bright the sound can be or how it goes through the strings, whatever. But I think it is, and it's arbitrary almost saying this in this particular context, but it is something that the majority of players still, especially guitarists, I hate to say, still take it very, very much for granted. That
Yes.
it is just a thing, because like, if you play specific instruments like the saz, or you play gypsy jazz, or you play the oud, or you play mandolin or something like that, then there are, those instruments all have their own, or those approaches and instruments all have their own picks and their own methodology for the physicality of the plectrum itself. And there's a reason for that. It's a reason why you can't go in and play proper manouche jazz with like a .38 Dunlop nylon, because that's not how you get that sound. So but it's worth, and this is something we will come on to talk about in a minute, I'm sure. But one of the biggest things is putting the pick in somebody's hand and saying, "Okay, we've talked enough. Try the thing, and see what I'm talking about."
Yeah, and the biggest scenario that there's a guy who is a local legend called Macca in our town, our very small town, and he's a fabulous guitarist. Basically, I wouldn't say he taught me everything I know, but basically everything I know about like really fast, proficient lead guitar. And I know him through my father and stuff like that. But he dropped in one day because he knew I was making picks, and I handed him one, and the first thing he did was he just went, "Man," like, and I said, "Yeah, we're gonna have to sit down one day." But the first response is undeniable. Is that when you can feel the difference, you can't argue it, even if you don't like it. Even if you don't like it, if you don't like the sound, if you don't like the feel, if you don't like the way it comes off the strings, you just have to acknowledge and experience that, hey, maybe there's something to this, and then your brain takes over and goes, oh, okay, well, this is a world I haven't explored. It's like when you first discover guitar pedals for the first time. That's the only thing I can kind of put it down to. And it's this weird thing, and I do think that the actual dynamic and the perspective of that is starting to change within the guitar community as a whole.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree. I think it's very because the it sounds like such an old man thing to say, but the internet and the ubiquity thereof means that people eventually, the word of mouth thing is still very strong, even though it takes place online rather than in person more and more. But a lot of the time, I mean, I was talking to a collector out in the US, the great Joe Macy, and he was saying that until, certainly in the United States, until about the year 2000, there wasn't even really a vintage collecting community. Which in guitar terms seems like a very weird thing, because people have been collecting guitars for, well, predominantly since the sort of mid 80s and onwards. But in picks, you'd think, surely, like when I started doing heavy ripping, I thought there must be somebody else out there talking about this. Surely to goodness there must be, and there wasn't, which I found very surprising. And people are now, it's less weird now. In the same way, it's less weird to have a pedal board that's full of really colourful, bespoke, handmade pedals. Whereas in the 90s, when I was coming up gigging, it was like Boss, all Boss, an MXR, a wah, and maybe a fancy drive. There's guys coming out now that are like, 17, playing into Kempers and, stuff that just literally didn't exist back then. So the attitude towards, no, I want to get the right sort of gear to accomplish the music I want to make, and I don't mind the fact that I've got to go and search for a smaller company for it. I think that's a big attitudinal change, which is a big plus, really.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Now I'm going to talk about Jaketto as a company,
sure,
which is a wild notion. And this is something you and I discussed privately, but you were not those sorts of things, but like. Jaketto hasn't been around for all that long.
No.
And you've managed to get it to a place in the community. Everybody knows the pit community is a wide area, but it doesn't have loads of people in it, and like hundreds of thousands of people in it. And everybody recognises everybody's gear. So I see your pick even if I'm scrolling through and think, oh, that's Jaketto immediately, because everyone's got their own distinct thing, But how has it felt, especially not coming from a fabrication background and coming into this area where you're working with this material and you're making boutique picks, and you've gone from being not a maker to a maker, and then to have the reach that the company's got in such a short period of time? How's it felt as an accomplishment?
I think the thing to keep in mind here for listeners is that I've said to you a lot of times that it is a freak scenario, and I want people to keep that in mind. I don't want someone to come into pick making, before I get to the question, I don't want someone to come into pick making and be like, I'm going to be like Jaketto, and they're just going to absolutely blitz it. It's not going to happen, and if it does, I hope it does. That's the key thing. I hope it does happen for someone, but it is so hard. There are makers that do just as much work or more work than we do or anything like that. It's just a perfect cocktail of my background in terms of occupations and jobs, and me working 20 hours a day. So that's the thing people didn't see, was me still to this day working 20 hours a day making picks, or talking to people, or talking to artists, or calling an artist and saying, hey, let's spend $500 on different stuff that looks cool or something like that. So it's important that I first say that I don't want to discourage anyone from making guitar picks, but I really want to emphasize that Jaketto is a freak scenario, and if you want to make picks, you make picks. But don't go in with any expectations. Do it because it's something you want to do and accomplish. That is my best advice. Now, onto the lovely question. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's truly a lovely thing that I get to spend 20 hours a day, doing what I genuinely love. I spent a vast majority of my life quite unhappy and depressed, and mental health, unfortunately, is this cruel beast that if you let it, will take a hold of your life, and there's no getting out of it. But I spoke to you before where Jaketto went for about 3 months from March to, or maybe 2.5, March to May of 2020. And I said, thanks for the support, we're done. Because I went back and, I joined the guitar tech world. I thought, this is the right decision for me. This is it. And I was there and I went from when Jaketto started, it was the happiest I've been in my life. As soon as I started there, my mental health just declined. I was depressed. I was crying all day. Oh, not all day, but you know what I mean. As soon as I'd hop in my car and drive home. And it wasn't the workplace. It was not the workplace. Yeah. It was just that when you find this thing that you're meant to be doing in your life and you kind of feel that you don't have a choice in it. So you just get compelled to do this one thing. For me, that's guitar picks, and I wake up at 3 a.m. and I'm just so excited to do what I do. It's like, there's been times it's the middle of the night and my wife will go to me, what are you doing? It's like 2 a.m. And I'm like, I realized that I didn't send Donovan Lloyd, one of our artists, this message, or there's something I can do on the website. It's just so exciting every single day. And I think that's the other advice to pick makers is don't go into it thinking, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to do this. Do it because you love it. And if you love it so much that you just have your life absorbed around it and love every aspect, or you see someone else do something and you don't necessarily want to copy what they do, but you're like, man, that is so cool for the community, or that is such a brilliant idea. There's stuff that goes on in the community. I look at that and I think I might have said this to you before, John. I don't look at anyone as the competitors because everyone's so different. It's you look at what they do and you go, wow, man, or woman, whichever one. How did you even conceive that? And I'm sure people do it to us too, but it's just this brilliant thing that being where we're at, I get to do what I love every day. I get to talk to people that, are some of my best friends now. And I'm very fortunate. And I'm just so happy now where my life is. If you told me literally a year ago where I'd be now and how my health would be, both physically and mentally, I wouldn't believe you. It's just been this incredible thing. And, everyone that is associated with Jaketto, like artists and Mandy and most importantly Smitty, like we're just so grateful that this is even an option, And that pretty much answers it. I guess the key thing is just grateful to be able to do anything we do within this realm.
Yeah, that's. We're not going to get into the nuts and bolts of your personal trials of things, but you and I have spoken about that quite a bit, and it's a wonderful thing to find something that you genuinely feel compelled to do, and it's amazing within the community itself how many people are talking to each other and forming friendships and so on because of their love of doing this.
Yeah,
which is a great thing in and of itself.
Yeah, I think with the community thing, Jaketto's kind of on the outskirts in a way because, as a few people might know, we don't follow anyone on social media. The reason for that is I know I will get distracted, so I spend all my time just making, and then when I hop on my phone, it's like, I've got someone talking to me from here. Otherwise, I'll end up talking all day instead of actually working. So Mandy does a bit of that. Smitty is actually someone that doesn't have anything to do with it. But if I do notice that something with another pick maker, they're going through a rough time or something like that, I definitely throw them a message because it's not like I seek out to view this stuff. It just comes up on Instagram in the explore page,
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just one of those things when I feel that everyone has a minimum obligation to make sure that other people are okay, especially when they might post something that's like, hey, this happened, I'm not going to work for 2 days. It's important you reach out and you say, hey, are you all right here, or are you just taking time off and you're going to be okay, or are you in a severe thing? Is there anything I can try and do to help you here? You get what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And it's something that I'm very pleased, if I may be serious for a moment, not that we weren't being serious, but It's something that I'm very pleased is now becoming a bit more normal, that we don't feel, I think in general people don't feel quite as isolated in their feelings as they have been in previous times. Like even 10 years ago, it's much more acceptable in a social sense to talk about that sort of stuff, and there has been a fair old bit of that in the community. I'm not going to mention names because we're all fairly aware of who's had a tough time in that in the last couple of years. And I know that there's a lot of support for people, which is something that I would actively, for those of you out there listening in listening land, I would actively encourage you. The important thing to remember is that a community is made up of people, and almost 100% of the people that you're speaking to, if they're anywhere near the musical sphere, they've swum in those waters before. Maybe not the deep end, but they've all swum in those waters before. I have. It's tough out there, and it's a lot tougher. We're starting to understand how much tougher it is on a day-to-day basis than maybe was understood previously. So talk about it. It's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, these are the questions. These are the questions that everybody gets.
Fire away.
And this is the bit that makes people upset, especially Chris from Dragon Picks. He was very unhappy about the fact that I put him on the spot, but it's everybody gets the same deal, so it's fine. Now, first things first.
Okay.
Who's doing the good work out in the community that you think? Your top 3 guys.
Oh, man.
I did say.
No. That's cool. It's cool. I've got this one. I mean, part of me wants to jokingly say Jaketto. But on a serious note, I when you're in this position, I think the best thing to do is just actually look at it. Man, Iron Age, Stone Age. If I had to choose a third. Okay, so Iron Age and Stone Age, just because they're Iron Age and Stone Age, they are what they are. And actually, you know what? Dragon's Picks. That's it. They're the 3 that got me into what I'm doing. I can't lie about that. They started everything for me in this realm. It has to be them 3. It really does.
Oh, it's a very concise and very approachable way of doing it, and that is really what we want. See, that wasn't so hard.
No, it was quite easy.
Yeah. Besides, if as the host is only asking you for 3 and you give me 3, you fulfilled the remit, and that's kind of what we're after,
That's exactly right.
Now, the next question I must ask you is, when it comes to, and we've I suppose we've covered that actually, your case for thicker picks, but what do you think what's the upsides for you? Like in a general sense, not just for your own personal playing, but what do you think the upsides are to thicker plectrums for the day-to-day player?
I think the general upsides is that for me, looking at it from a ergonomic point of view, I guess ergonomic's the right word, is that me and Smitty only discussed this the other day. If you've got a thinner pick, you tend to clench a bit more. So you've got to come down further. If you've got a thicker one, you've got more distance between your actual fingers where you hold it and your thumb. So you're not actually kind of pushing down, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a bit of a looser hold, I guess is the best word. Like you're not tightening that muscle as much. That was one thing. And the other thing too is with thinner picks, you don't actually get that. I mean, you can do it, but it's not as dramatic. Is that bevels, tapers, everything like that can be done to a thicker pick all adds up. So for me, it's just purely ergonomic. Even if someone doesn't, so they play a thicker pick, and they don't enjoy it or they don't like it, which is perfectly okay as well. I think it's important to know what's out there in terms of thicker picks and understand the benefits, which is for me just ergonomics. But in terms of Jaketto world, it's exactly that, but also making them look really cool at the same time.
Yeah, let's not forget that's perfectly acceptable, because if that wasn't the case, all the guitars would be sunburst or black.
That's exactly right.
Do you know what I mean? People wouldn't be out there losing their minds over an Aristides that's got like some crazy pseudo graphite, like half matte spray with a clear acrylic back on it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's not necessary, but that doesn't mean that it isn't necessary. Do you know
That,
what I mean?
yeah, that's exactly right. And I have had people, just to add on to what you said there, I have had people be like, oh, a Jazz 3 is all I need. And my response to that is always the same thing, and same with Smitty and same with Mandy. Every time we see a comment like that or we get something, it's like, that's great. That's perfect. If you have what you want, that is exactly what we want. If it doesn't
Yeah,
matter whether it's our picks, whether it's Jazz 3, whether it's an Ernie Ball prodigy, it doesn't matter if it's a piece of wood you found in your backyard and you've made it into a pick. It doesn't matter if it's a blade of grass or anything. If you're happy with your pick, you've won. You've got it. I have
yeah,
nothing to try and help you with here. So it's this weird, it's this weird scenario where people will say that, and I'm not trying to convince them to buy it because there's no point. If they're happy, they're happy.
yep. It doesn't have to be. We've got a real binary. I find this, I've talked about this at length, but I find that there's a real sort of black and white state a lot of the time with gear in the guitar community, where it's like it's either this or this. It can't be both. So I'm into the Jazz 3. So the number of comments I see, I'm not going to name makers here, but like the number of comments where people have put up things that are a little bit more out there, or they have a wider reach, and they made a claim about reinventing the pick or coming at it from a new angle or something, and the number of folk that are like, nah, nothing's ever going to beat my Dunlop 1mm nylon, or nothing's going to beat my Clayton, and it's that's all I need, and why would you need anything else? It's like, again, like you say, and I've said this to countless people when they've messaged me on Instagram saying, what should I buy? I've only ever used this. And I say to them, well, you can go and try these other things, and I can recommend these other things, but if you've only ever used that for 10 years, then maybe that's all you need. But it's a bit like that. It's like that attitude of saying, well, I live in a town, and I know there are other towns, but this is a town, so why would I need to see other towns? I mean, it's crazy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
and
I really like this book, so I'm just going to read it over and over again to the exclusion of all others. I mean, that's just mental.
yeah, or for instance, a movie. If you like one movie, you're not going to watch that the rest of your life. I think the main thing is that people want to jump into this realm of buying hundreds of guitars or hundreds of pedals or amps or leads even, or whatever it may be, whatever have you. But the one thing that's connecting you to your guitar, apart from if you're playing, fingerstyle or something like that, is the pick. Why not play around with it? Why not even spend, like, in reality, spend $10 at a music shop and just buy a bunch of different ones, and worst case scenario, you know exactly what you like. You just come back to what you did and you can say, I tried that. It didn't work for me, which is brilliant. That's just as good.
Yeah, it's that I love that, and that's the one. It's my favourite thing about the pick community is the fact that if somebody comes and says, "Well, I found the pick I like," ace. That's okay. You don't have to then. It's like, well, up yours. I've got this pick. It's like, that's really good, man.
Yeah,
Cool. Leave it alone. It's fine.
Yeah, that is the perfect thing, and that's all we want. I mean, there's been scenarios where people have bought a pick from us, and they're like, "Oh, I'd like this if it's just a fraction thinner. Everything's perfect. I love the tone. I love this. I love that. Want it a fraction thinner." And I do it with our artists all the time as well, where I'm just like, "Okay, man, I'll just make you another one." And that's fine. I mean, we don't really do custom requests. We might be opening a custom shop later this year. Who knows? It's on the plans, but this has been a wild year so far, so who knows? But there are times when I have just made, like, they haven't been disappointed in the pick. It's just like people have opened themselves up and they've got, say, a 6mm pick, and they're like, "Hey, I actually really like this. I just need it taken down like 0.5. That's all we're talking about." Then they've come from like a Dunlop, one of the orange ones or something like that. So they get this immediate thing of, "Hey, I actually like this. I just need it changed this tiny bit." And I can go, "Yeah, I can make you one of those, mate. Don't worry about it at all." So it's crazy what happens when you open yourself up to the possibilities of both the world and the guitar pick community and world.
this is absolutely 150% true. And I would also like to add, on top of that, that there's no major gatekeeping here. So if somebody comes, the only barrier between you being in a community like the Plectroverse and not being in it is whether or not you've got an interest in picks. It doesn't matter what pick you use. It doesn't matter if it's made of, and there is one out there made of solid diamonds. If anybody wants to lend me $7,000, I'll get one. I'll send you the link for that. It's incredible. But it doesn't have to be that way. It can be this other thing, and I think that's a very important thing to remember. Now, final question for you. Same one everybody gets. Is there anybody you would like to give big shout outs to in or outside of the community before we do the thing?
Yeah, look, just everyone that supported us, I guess. That's the main thing. Like, it's unbelievable the amount of people we get sending us messages being like, I've played guitar for 2 decades, this has changed my life. The amount of happiness that brings me, or Smitty in particular, you know, it's absolutely incredible when we get messages like that. And the proudest moment for me is whenever I send a pic that Smitty has made and someone comes back and they're like, this has changed basically something that someone's been doing for a decade or 2 decades or 5 years or 2 years. If it changes the way they do it, and I've had Smitty here make it, that is the proudest moment of my life, because you know, I had to teach Smitty how to make picks, everything like that, and it's just been the best word I can think of. It's just absolutely beautiful watching people give the support, and then I get to watch both Jaketto grow, or Smitty grow with his art of making picks or anything like that. It's just beautiful to watch it happen, is the best way to put it. On that subject, do you have any questions about Smitty's technique? Is probably an important one.
Well, Smitty, who I would love to have a chat with Smitty, because he seems like such an interesting cat. But I know that he came from the car world, didn't he?
Well,
like
yeah,
detailing cars.
Yeah, as a hobby, not as a job.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah, so he just
before he joined Jaketto.
So he has a background in pest control, and his hobby was detailing cars. So
Right.
it was kind of I've known Joel all my life. Oh, Joel and Smitty, the same person for the listeners. So I've known him my entire life. He was my neighbour growing up. His father and my father were best friends. And look, Smitty is the most beautiful, kind person you can ever wish to meet. But his background is pest control, and his hobby was detailing cars, because he's had a massive interest in cars ever since he was young.
Yeah, that's one of the most unusual. I mean, I know you weren't making like anything at all, but Smitty doesn't play, does he?
No, Smitty doesn't play Smoke on the Water. He cannot play anything. He can test a pick and he can know what a good pick is, but if I say to him, play me a song, he just stares at me. He doesn't have a musical bone in his body. I think he could, if he sat down and went for it, but that's not in Smitty. Smitty likes the art of making picks. Smitty loves the creation process and everything like that. He's really good at that. But he does not play guitar, and when I tell people that, it's kind of mind-boggling to them. And the thing is that he can test a pick. He'll know when there's a bad pick. There'll be times he'll just hold something up and be like, this is terrible. And I look at it and I go, yep, throw it in the bin. She's gone. Because maybe something's gone wrong with the epoxy or something like that. But that's the interesting thing, is a lot of people don't know Smitty doesn't play. He doesn't own a guitar. He doesn't own a bass. He doesn't own a keyboard. He doesn't own a violin. He can't sing. There's nothing musical going on there.
He can't even sing. This poor guy.
But the first time I'm showing him how to make one. I'm there. I just dusted it up, everything. Made the pick, and I said, do you think you understand how to do it? And he goes, yeah, I think so. And he's doing it. He took a while the first time, which is understandable. And he's done it. And he's kind of looked at it and goes, how's that? And I'm just kind of staring at it and staring at him, and I'm like, yeah, it's it's on par with one of mine, and I've been doing this for months. So Smitty's, in the terms of Jaketto, he doesn't talk to anyone in terms of like community and that. It was his birthday yesterday, so happy birthday, Joel. So,
happy birthday, Smitty.
Yeah, we got a present coming on the way for him too from Jaketto, so that's lovely. And yeah, it's absolutely mind-boggling to me still. There's times I just turn to him when we're in the workshop and I stare at him and I say, do you understand what you're doing right now? Like you're making these things that are changing people's lives that for an activity they've loved their entire life, and you do not even play the instrument. It's not unheard of to happen, as we've discussed before, but it is so rare. And Joel, he can probably name a Jazz 3 pick, and that's about it. He knows all our models, everything like that. But Joel emulates what he's seen me do, and then he'll just do his own twists on them. So he knows what's acceptable for Jaketto and what's not, what to do and what not to do. If I had to, like Jaketto on the Road, which is happening 27th of March, so about 4 weeks from now.
Excellent.
If he wasn't coming with me, and I said to you, I need you in the workshop, he'd be able to do it all himself. I have absolute confidence he would be able to do it himself.
Well, that's as strong an endorsement as you could possibly give. And I know you've known him forever, but at the same time, it's still wonderful to have somebody come in who is 150% not in the musical community and still manage to craft these things. And I would like all the listeners to remember, your boy Leo Fender was mostly deaf and an engineer. He wasn't a musician, so and he did a thing. So it's not a prerequisite, in terms of a craft. I think that's fabulous.
I'll add to that in saying that, Joel has had the same failures I have had, but the advantage was Joel had someone there, or Smitty, Joel, sorry, again, same person. So Smitty's had someone to guide him every step of the way, and if he gets lost, he always had me. But he's at a point now where he's just an absolute machine and a weapon at it. So it's been incredible to watch him grow as a guitar pick maker, and there's been countless times I've said to him, like, again, everything with Jaketto's just been this freak accident where how can you get someone that he played a guitar. The last time I remember him playing guitar was him trying to play, I think it was like Mission Impossible or something, on this old acoustic guitar when, like, over a decade ago, maybe a decade and a half, and he stared at me and goes, "This sucks," and then just puts the guitar down. And how can you go from that to making how can you go from that to making guitar picks is just absurd for me. So as he is my best friend and everything, I say to him every day, if you weren't good at this, you wouldn't be here. There's only, the way Jaketto is shaping up and everything, there's only room for, top tier, best of the best. And if you weren't in that, it wouldn't happen. The same reason why Mandy doesn't make picks. She's just not good at it. But damn, Mandy is good at customer care, good at talking to artists when they need a talking to, everything like that. That my main thing when it comes to these guys like Mandy and Smitty is I always play off their strengths. And Smitty's strengths is the pick making and that, but I wouldn't say he doesn't want to talk to people, but it's not his prime interest. Whereas I'll talk to people all day long about guitar picks or guitar. I just love it. So I just go, Smitty, you don't have to talk to anyone. He'll talk to artists occasionally, but man, you don't have to talk to them. You do what you want. And if I play with these people's strengths, they also give back more to the company, because I look at this, and I'm sure Smitty looks at it this way, and they go, hey, Jack actually doesn't make me do something I don't want to do or I don't enjoy. So that's the way I approach it, and I find that the best results happen after we've implemented that, because I've been in workplaces I didn't enjoy, and I really want Jaketto to be somewhere that he enjoys and Mandy enjoys being at, and that it's just something that's so important to me. Like, all the artists know this, that if I have a slight feeling that they're not well in some way, I'll reach out to them or I'll call them out of the blue and be like, hey man, I haven't seen you actually post for like a week. And it's not like me being like, hey, I endorse you. Why aren't you posting? It's me saying, are you actually all right here? What's going on? So yeah, something I did want to add into this, if I can give kind of like a shameless, what can you call it? Maybe plug, is that the right word? Is that the word they're using now? Like a plug?
That's kind of the point of having you on. So yeah.
Well, okay, Jaketto on the road is going to be something, a bit of a beast that was suggested by yourself, as you know, and as the listeners don't know. I often refer to Mr. John Tron here when there's an issue that I might not be seeing clearly, or what he thinks is the best step for Jaketto. And I would say it's probably happened 5 times now, something around that mark, where I've just kind of wanted a bit of insight. I said to John, what do we do next? Like, this is growing so fast. What do you think is the next thing? And John basically said filming genuine reactions, which is something you've done with bands. So I looked at it and I added up the numbers and I went, right, so I'm basically going to lose thousands of dollars doing this. There's no way around it. That is the guarantee. I'm going to lose thousands of dollars doing this, but we're going to do it because the community needs it. That's the be all and end all. There's no kind of choice where I can be like, oh, well, they'll eventually get around to trying it. It's like, no, I've got to travel with these people, whether they're artists of mine, whether it's some random person that has never heard of us, whether it's a customer, bringing them all these picks and also bringing them maybe the dynamic of a pick we haven't tried to make before or anything like that. Like, we're going to these people, we're not going to sell them anything. We're not going to have them technically we could over the website or something, but we're not actually going to let these people buy any products from it. We're going to where they are, whether that's in a recording studio, whether it's in their house that they've invited us to, whether it's in a band practice area, and we're just going to take them about 20 picks and they're going to test them all and give their actual feedback. And that's the key thing, is the first people we are going to, there's 2 lined up at the same place, and I said to them, if you think this is bad, if you don't like one pick, you need to say it. There is not some of this, hey, these guys traveled 6 hours by car to get here from 3 a.m. in the morning. I want to say every pick's good. It's like, no, you need to say when they're bad or you don't enjoy this one for X, Y, Z reason, because it's about laying all this on the line and everything we do and having the confidence that at least these people are going to walk away and think to themselves, hey, even if I didn't like these picks, even if I hated them, even if, anything, if they walk away and they think to themselves, I learnt something about myself as a player, or I learnt there was more options out there, or I learnt this, or I learnt that, that is the goal. That's just the goal at the end of the day. And I don't think, apart from you, I don't think it's really been done at all within the music community in any regard. So it's a massive undertaking. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of money gone, but that's what it's not about. Like, I had people message me as soon as we announced it. They said, do you know how much that's going to cost? It's like, yeah, I've added it up. There's a lot of petrol. There's a lot of guitar picks that I won't be able to sell because they've been used. It's a wild undertaking, but I do think it's the right thing in steps of both a company and, as a community in terms of guitar, because no one else is kind of taking their products to someone, if that makes sense. And it's this completely, it's quite obscene, to be honest. When you mentioned it to me, my first thought was, I don't know if that's possible on a grand scale. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, it doesn't matter what I think is possible or not possible, because I also didn't think Jaketto would get this far. So my opinion,
go ham.
So what's possible and what's not possible is just a perception in terms of Jaketto at the moment. So I've just opened up, like, we've got some big things planned for this year, but that's near the top of the list. It's absolutely insane what we're trying to undertake, especially because we're trying to go, 5-6 months. Trying to go 5-6 different places this year. And then season 2, which will be next year, is just going to be even more ridiculous, where we've already got some stuff lined up for that.
Excellent. Well, I'm very much looking forward to that, and I know that I'd be astonished if other people in the community aren't as well. Also because you're doing it down under, and that's a scene that a lot of people don't, although you should, know about. So in terms of music, there's a lot of wicked music coming out of that part of the world. I've talked to Lachlan Dale at Artist Catharsis and Worlds Within Worlds Records before, and interviewed him for this, and the body of it is just out of this world, man. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, thumbs up. That is tremendous. It has been an honour having you on, my friend. Genuine pleasure indeed. And I will be posting this in due course on our normal platforms. It will also be going up on YouTube in audio form. There'll be links to all of the Jaketto action, the Instagram and everything else, and any subsequent things that you want to link me to. I'll include all of that in the links in this description. So it has been wonderful having you on. I hope you have enjoyed yourself. You're not compelled to say you have, but you know.
No, it's been great. I've actually been looking forward to this. I've got another few things I've got to do in terms of interviews / podcasts in that realm. This was the first, and I didn't know how I'd go recording it, but I think everything's going to work out for us. So hopefully, if people listen to this, it's going to be fine.
Well, otherwise, it's just going to be me talking on my own with long periods of silence. So,
yeah.
Fingers crossed, everything is cool.
Oh, I'd still listen to it. I listen to the YouTube all the time, so there's not that much difference for me.
That is pretty much the same, yeah. That's that guy talking. Well, absolutely wonderful, my friend. So thank you very, very much for joining me. And at this point, I will say, off the record, this is when I'm going to do my outro bit, and then I will have a chat with you very quickly, if you're okay to hang on the line.
Yeah, of course, mate.
So, massive thanks to Jack for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate it. It was a wonderful chat, as ever. If you would like to join me for the next episode of Welcome to the Plectroverse, you are more than welcome to do so. And if you'd like to listen to any of our other episodes, they're all linked in and around this one. So, it just remains for me to say thank you very much for listening. My name is John Tron Davidson. This is Welcome to the Plectroverse from Heavy Repping. And just remember, if you're not sure what to do in life, rep hard, rep heavy, and we'll see you soon.